In this video, I'm going to tackle what I think are the 5 most important elements of what makes a good cold email, and I'm actually going to even break open my own emails and show you 4 examples of emails I have sent, 2 of which were unsuccessful and 2 of which became successful. I do recommend you stick around through the whole video because we're going to cover a lot of ground here, and as always, if you find this video helpful or inspiring, you can leave a like, subscribe for more, and you can buy me a coffee in the video description if you really like it. So the first thing that I'd recommend when you're sending out a cold email is you need to keep it brief. I think this is one of the most important ones. I've had so many times where people have wanted to reach out to me and build a relationship, which I think is awesome, but I get like a 2-page email, and I just unfortunately don't have the time to be able to sift through that amount of information and read about your story and all the music that you have to send. I just don't have that time anymore, and I'm sure a lot of other composers don't either. So when you send a shorter email, really condensed, it shows to me that you respect my time, or another composer that you respect their time, and they're much more inclined to send you a short response back. The way I typically formulate my emails are into 3 very short paragraphs, and when I say paragraphs, what I mean are like 1 to 2 sentences. The first 2 sentences, I give a little intro, I say, hope you're doing well. I might give them some context as to why I'm reaching out, like, I heard your music and absolutely love it. I found your YouTube channel. We met a few months ago. That'll be my first paragraph. The second little paragraph, I jump straight to the point in why I'm reaching out, and it's really important that you be extremely specific. I've gotten emails sometimes where people want to say hi, but they don't necessarily have something actionable that I can do as a response. So if you want them to answer a question for you, say, I'd love to ask you a quick question, and put the question right there. If you'd like to meet for coffee, say, I'd love to meet you for a coffee. If you're looking for work, say, I'm looking for some work. And just be very transparent and honest. People can sort of sift through when you're not being authentic and driving home what it is you're looking for in that email. So just put it there. You know, save everybody the trouble of having to figure it out. Just put it right there in that second paragraph. In the third paragraph, which again is just a sentence or 2, I make sure to tell them I really appreciate their time. And I usually will tell them that there's no pressure for whatever thing I'm asking for. The reason I do that is because if you corner someone, they may say yes and then back down later and say no, or they may just say no altogether. People are much more inclined to say no to things because we like to protect ourselves. So if you keep that pressure loose, you say, no pressure, I understand you're busy, I respect your time. I've found that people are actually much more inclined to at least give you a response and tell you if there is work available or not. The second thing that I consider really important is to use proper grammar and spelling. Using improper grammar or spelling is an indicator to me as a hiring person that someone may not have the greatest attention to detail. Now, I know not everybody is a native English speaker. I'm not expecting or asking that. We're incredibly fortunate to have countries around the world speaking and writing our language. That's amazing. But I don't necessarily know that when I'm receiving an email from someone. And if I see lots of grammar mistakes, if I see lots of spelling mistakes, you know, you just don't want to risk it. Better to be safe than sorry and just make sure you're super hyper correct about all that stuff than raise any potential yellow or red flags for people who want to work with you or you'd want to work with. The same goes for spelling people's names. I've received some applications from people, and I know other composers who have, where people have spelled my name wrong. And again, it's like, you know, it doesn't bother me personally, but I just wouldn't risk it. Make sure to double check. You double checking your spelling and grammar, your references, the links that you're sending, making sure everything works before you hit send, it just shows that you have a good attention to detail, and it's much more likely for someone to see you as a professional for that reason. The next tip I have is with regards to sending applications, if you're applying for a job or something like that, and that is to follow the instructions exactly. Absolutely exactly. Very similar to the previous point I made. If you don't follow the instructions exactly the way it says, if you've got a subject header you need to put in there and you don't put it in, if you don't attach files the correct way, all of these things stack up against you and can be an indicator that you may be rushing to apply for a job, rushing to build a network, and not being thoughtful and careful with how you approach your wording and things that you're sending. An enormous selling point, one of the greatest selling points I think for a creative professional, is reliability. The fact that you can count on them to follow your instructions the first time and not have to watch them. And so again, just make sure you follow those instructions exactly. If things are on there, just do it the way it says, you know? Don't get too creative with it. The fourth point I have is actually extremely specific and pretty much just stemmed out of my own experience looking for people to hire. And that is, I recommend attaching files, not attaching links. The reason I say that is because I received 85 submissions, and I asked people to send me their music, and I got a plethora of different methods. Some people used zip files, Some people used MP3s. Some people used SoundCloud. Some people used Google Drive. And I got some links that were so complicated I couldn't even open them, unfortunately. But I found the MP3s to be the best method. And the reason why is on a mobile device, if I go through my emails and I'm clicking on an MP3, boom, it just shoots me straight to the song, immediately starts playing. Even Google Drive, if I were to click the Google Drive link, it takes about 3 redirects before I can even get to the page to listen to the music. And if I was in more of a rush or less patient, I just wouldn't get to it. I wouldn't have a chance to listen to it. And, again, you want to make sure things are easy and accessible. So from my experience, sending an MP3 is the best way to go. I would even advise against a zip file because, again, same thing. You have to actually extract the file, open it up. You don't know what's in the zip file to begin with. Some people get a little wary about cybersecurity, and so if they don't know what's in the file, they might be less inclined to download it. In short, I would just recommend attaching small files as best you can when the situation allows it. It just makes it easier for everybody. And then the last suggestion I want to make, which I think is a really important and often overlooked one, is to establish your own personal boundaries. What I mean by that is if I receive an application from somebody and they're ready to start in an hour and they'll work all night to get the project done over the weekend, no questions asked, unlimited revisions, any price point, I get a little wary. And the reason is that shows me that someone values this project, this gig, over anything else that's going on in their life. And they may not have other projects or other things that they value enough. When I talk to someone who I perceive as a professional, they are often cautious about new opportunities. They ask good questions to make sure that they're the right fit for the project. They tell me their schedule and their availability, which sometimes can be limited. They make sure that they're very clear about the price point and the terms of agreement. They ask questions and they vet me back, which shows me that they treat themselves as a professional. It shows that they value what they do, who they are, and what they bring to the table. Now, this applies probably more towards follow-up emails when you potentially have a project going. You don't necessarily need to set these boundaries when you're just reaching out to say hi to somebody. If you're afraid that setting those boundaries will get you fired from a potential gig, I think you're wrong. In my experience, setting those boundaries only brings more respect from the people you want to work with. Now, one little bonus point that I'd like to add to all of this is, let's say you follow all of these points, all of the things we're talking about, you send an email and you get nothing back. A lot of times people will move on and assume that it's just a hard no. And don't ever assume that silence means no. Don't ever assume that no means no. Usually just means no right now. So I always encourage you to send a follow-up email if you don't get a response. I wouldn't send it the next day. I typically wait 2 weeks before I send a follow-up email, and if I don't get a response after that, maybe a month. It is okay to annoy someone a little bit. It shows that you're persistent. You just don't want to annoy them too much to the point where they tell you, screw off. In the follow-up emails, I usually keep it extremely brief. I just say, hey, just following up from the previous conversation. Let me know if you're interested, no pressure. So with all that said, we're going to take a look at some of my emails. 2 of my unsuccessful ones, 2 of my successful ones. I am going to blur out the clients' names out of respect for their privacy. But let's talk about some of the things that I think worked and didn't work. Now, for some context, this is an email I sent after I'd met somebody in person. It was a composer I really admired, and I wanted to hopefully build a relationship very shortly after I moved here to LA, so I was very eager for opportunities, which may have been a bit of a fault of mine. I basically told them, I arranged a piece of theirs, I appreciated their time. Now, the next thing I did was I sent my music, and in my opinion, that's a mistake. The reason is, they get music all the time, and it's just so early in the relationship. This person doesn't even really know me very well yet. What I would have done now is I would have followed up by trying to get a one-on-one coffee meeting or a quick phone call, because I want to get my personality at the forefront. I want that person to feel like they trust me before I send them my music. That was, I think, a mistake I made. And then I kind of elaborated. It wasn't a terribly long email, so it wasn't too bad, but I think I could have shown a little bit more respect for their time. Kept it even shorter because this was a double or if not a triple A composer that's probably very, very busy all the time. So they were very gracious. I actually got a response from them much farther down the road after a couple more follow-ups. And this person was great, but just too early in my career, probably not the right time. So this one didn't work out. Okay, so here's another example of an email that didn't work out for me. You'll notice that over time, actually, this was later in my career, my emails get a little bit shorter, which I think is great. I try to be as transparent as possible. I said, I'm sure you're super busy. I hope you don't mind the message. And I wanted to offer help with anything on your plate. Now, I actually think I phrased that very well because a lot of times people try and just pitch what they want to do. And it's much better, in my opinion, to try and determine what someone needs help with. That's much more likely to get you a gig than you just saying, I do fantasy music and I want to write fantasy music. So I think I handled that really well. I was a little transparent, maybe a little too transparent about the fact that work had been slow. I don't really think that somebody else needs to know that, honestly. Again, it sort of probably raises a yellow flag that it's like, oh, so they just need work. And I probably, in retrospect, would not have put any of this. I would have just said, I'm happy to help out with anything if you need it. This person did respond, which is cool. They appreciated the email. They said they didn't have any work, but they'll keep me in mind. So not a total failure, but again, just reflecting on what I could have done differently. I think there's a couple things I could have adjusted. So now I'm going to show you 2 emails that were successful. The first one was one I sent quite a while back, so it was a little bit longer. This landed me a gig, an ongoing gig, writing music for a content creator on YouTube. What I had done basically was, at the time, I was looking for different creators who were making content that I thought I could present my music to. And I looked specifically for people that didn't seem to have original music anywhere in their video descriptions. So when I found this creator, I really genuinely liked their stuff. I introduced myself briefly. I said I was impressed with their animations. And I basically presented what I thought was a potential problem, which was, I said, I reached out because I'm noticing that most of your videos are currently using stock libraries or public domain material, and basically asked, are you in the market or do you have an interest in looking for custom music? Now, I think my timing was incredibly lucky here because it just so happened that they were right in the midst of looking for a composer. So worked out really well for me, but I also think I presented myself very well and respected their time and kept it relatively brief in the email. Again, like I said, I would even keep this briefer today by my standards. But my focus, again, was on problem solving, and I think in this case it helped me land that gig. And the last example I want to show you is actually just a quick follow-up I had. So this was another project that landed me ongoing work from a cold email. I had gotten a response from my first email that said, thank you very much, but we're not interested. And I waited about 2 months, sent a follow-up email to basically just reiterate the same question. And this one actually worked. So I just said, reaching out to see if you had any interest in collaboration. What I had done specifically was I tried to find a piece of music I had written that I thought was relevant to some of the music that they needed. So in this case, it happened to be something Western. So I sent them a Western cue. And this one did indeed land me a gig, which was fantastic. You'll notice how brief this email is, which I think, again, really helps. I'm pretty sure in my emails I don't really push too hard any pressure. I don't show desperation for the most part. And I think that really helps me land these gigs. Now, there's not too much of a difference between all of these emails. The reality is, like, they're all phrased very similarly, and I'm not the only factor in whether or not I get hired for a cold email I send. You could send the perfect cold email, and if it's not the right time or not the right person, it won't happen. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have good email etiquette. I think that all of these things are prerequisites towards getting a gig, because without them, you may stumble somewhere along the way, even if you do get a gig, and it can raise flags for someone. So my encouragement is to follow all these steps as best you can. Don't be afraid to send the follow-ups, and just keep trying this, expand your net as wide as you can. I don't even know how many emails I've sent that have been unsuccessful. 500 probably. And the ones that have landed me gigs, maybe 5. But those relationships have actually expanded. And one of those emails that I sent, a cold email, through a snowball effect, wound up getting me music for Flashgitz. So these things can happen. You can build relationships through cold emails. Always prioritize meeting people in person, speaking over the phone, speaking over Zoom if you can. But if that's not an option for you, or you just want to open the door gently to conversation, then yeah, send a cold email. Now, if you enjoy these videos and you want to have another topic for me to discuss, just leave it in the comments below. Otherwise, if you want to support me, you can buy me a coffee in the video description, or you can just leave a like and subscribe for more content. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.